If you had Wolverine claws, would you use them to fight or just pick berries? For most people, this is a no-brainer, but for others, they're happy to pick their berries. There have been so many deadly predators throughout history, but what if I told you that these predators weren't the strongest, weren't the fastest, and weren't even the scariest creatures that lived during their time? It's hard to believe, but there are still examples of this today. For example, think about a lion that is considered the king of the jungle, which is strange considering it doesn't even live in jungles, but that's besides the point. The lion is one of the most feared predators in the animal kingdom, but it's not the largest, it's not the fastest, and it's not the most dangerous. Elephants, hippos, and giraffes would all be able to kill a lion if it came down to it. So, why don't they? It simply comes down to the mentality and temperament of these animals. A lion is much more aggressive and fearless, allowing it to intimidate these animals, eliminating them as threats, which they otherwise would be. This is something that has always happened, and today we will go over the most extreme cases of when evolution gave lethal weapons to creatures that didn't want them. You'll want to watch to the end because it will make you question evolution, especially the final creature. Imagine walking through a prehistoric forest, the ground trembling beneath your feet. Birds scatter, trees sway, and suddenly, boom! A shadow so massive it blocks out the sun moves over you. You look up, and it's not a storm cloud, it's Argentinosaurus, the gentle giant that could have been a walking apocalypse. This thing was an absolute unit, stretching up to 100 feet long and believed to weigh around 100 tons. To put this in perspective, that's heavier than over 10 elephants and is the equivalent of an empty Boeing passenger jet. Its neck alone was longer than a school bus, and its tail was a biological wrecking ball just waiting to be used. Instead of smashing things like a dinosaur version of Godzilla, it spent its days slowly strolling through forests, munching on plants, and generally not bothering anyone. But this didn't mean that nothing bothered Argentinosaurus. There was one creature that constantly attempted to take on this beast, and that was Giganotosaurus, basically a supersized T-Rex on steroids. Giganotosaurus was a 40-foot-long, razor-toothed apex predator that roamed South America around the same time as Argentinosaurus. It hunted in groups, meaning multiple Giganotosaurs might have coordinated attacks to wear down a single Argentinosaurus. This would have been a slow and brutal battle, with the Giganotosaurs biting at the Titan's legs and flanks, trying to make it collapse. But what if instead of just trying to survive these attacks, Argentinosaurus actually fought back? Here's where things get interesting. If this mega herbivore had just a little more aggression, it could have been one of the most terrifying land creatures ever. That 60-foot-long tail wasn't just for balance. It could have been a prehistoric whip of destruction, potentially strong enough to shatter bones or send a Giganotosaurus flying like a rag doll. It was so big that even a full-grown Giganotosaurus probably looked at it like a house cat looks at a refrigerator. If it wanted, Argentinosaurus could have crushed its enemies just by stepping on them. Some sauropods are believed to have used their long necks like battering rams, slamming predators with enough force to break ribs. Argentinosaurus was strong enough to snap trees, so imagine what it could do to a hungry predator. So if this creature decided to use the weapons in its arsenal, Giganotosaurus might have gone extinct just from fear alone. But I guess Argentinosaurus had bigger things to worry about, which is ironic. But if it didn't eat enough, this titan wouldn't have been able to sustain its extreme size. While its extreme size could have allowed it to dominate the land, there was another creature that ruled the skies. And unlike our gentle giant, this one could have turned the world into its hunting ground if it had just been a little meaner. If you looked up during the late Cretaceous, you might have seen what looked like a nightmare bird straight out of a horror movie. But Quetzalcoatlus wasn't a bird. It was a flying reptile as tall as a giraffe, with a wingspan rivaling a fighter jet. Despite its absolute monster status, it didn't terrorize the land below like a prehistoric dragon. But let's be honest, it totally could have. This creature was perfectly adapted for the skies, but for some reason it spent an awful lot of time walking. Fossil evidence suggests it spent a lot of time on the ground, stalking prey like a giant winged giraffe-stork hybrid. It hunted small dinosaurs, scooping them up with its massive 6-foot beak. But How much havoc could Quetzalcoatlus have caused if it wasn't so chill? Instead of just gliding around looking for carrion, Quetzalcoatlus could have dive-bombed prey at high speeds, stabbing dinosaurs straight through the skull with its spear-like beak. And if this wasn't bad enough, it could have snatched up smaller dinosaurs and flown away with them, making the ground a constant danger zone. Imagine a 50-pound raptor getting plucked off the earth, kicking and screaming, never to be seen again. But although evolution gave this creature free roam with no natural predators and the ability to hunt on ground and in the air, it may actually have been smarter that it didn't reach its full potential. It didn't need to be aggressive. It likely fed on small animals and whatever was easy to snatch up. Why risk a fight when food was easy to find? Sometimes being massive and intimidating is enough to survive without needing to pick a fight. And if there's one prehistoric creature that truly understood the art of looking terrifying but preferring the quiet life, it was Deinocheirus. At first glance, you'd think this thing was built to tear apart anything in its path, standing as tall as a T-Rex, armed with claws the size of swords, and sporting a bizarre, humpbacked frame that screamed, "Unstoppable monster." For decades, Deinocheirus was one of the biggest mysteries in paleontology, because for a long time, all we had were its arms. Massive 8-foot-long arms with giant claws that looked like they belonged to some unstoppable killing machine. Scientists thought they'd found the remains of a super predator, some kind of Jurassic Park final boss. Then they found the rest of it and realized how wrong they were. This thing was half duck, half T-Rex, part sloth, and a little bit of Godzilla thrown in for fun, reaching lengths of 36 feet, shaped like an ostrich that went to the gym but skipped leg day. But while it decided to not be Jurassic Park's final boss, it could have definitely been a contender if it wanted to be. It had claws that were perfect for gutting predators while being bigger than almost every other carnivore around it. If Deinocheirus decided to use its size, power, and built-in machetes to dominate its environment, then it could have gone down as one of the most fearsome apex predators in history. But instead, it chose to chill by the water, eat some plants, and occasionally scoop up a fish or two. Some would argue this was a waste of potential, but others would argue that it was living the dream. But Deinocheirus wasn't the only giant that looked like it belonged in a battle, but preferred a laid-back lifestyle. Meet Megatherium, a prehistoric sloth that had all the tools to be an unstoppable juggernaut, but chose to take life at its own, very slow pace, which I guess isn't a surprise to most people. If you think of sloths today, you probably picture tiny, slow-moving tree dwellers that struggle to cross a road without causing a traffic jam. But Megatherium was built different. This monster was around 13 feet, weighing as much as an elephant, and possessed built-in swords up to 2 feet long. It used these to tear down entire trees, just so it could get the best leaves. If this isn't a fussy eater, then I don't know what is. Megatherium could rear up on its hind legs and turn into a 13-foot-tall nightmare with razor-sharp claws when threatened by predators like saber-toothed cats and terror birds. But even these creatures thought twice before messing with Megatherium. Its size alone meant that it didn't need to fight. But what if it changed its mind? With its massive claws and brute strength, Megatherium could have ripped apart prey like a prehistoric grizzly. No predator of its time would have stood a chance if Megatherium actively sought out fights. And it shows this may have been the right decision considering it survived millions of years simply by being too big, too strong, and too well equipped for anything to take it down. However, there may have been one creature that could have achieved this if it had murder on its mind. And that's Therizinosaurus, a dinosaur that looked like it had been designed by a mad scientist who couldn't decide between a sloth, a raptor, and a horror movie monster. It was a giant, feathered, plant-eating dinosaur with claws longer than most swords, a body the size of a small T-Rex, and a set of weapons that could have made it one of the most fearsome predators of its time. If it had chosen that path, if you saw it for the first time and had to guess what it did, you'd probably assume it hunted down everything in its path and left behind a trail of destruction, using its natural scythes that could slice through flesh, armor, and even bone. It was bigger than most predators, making it an extreme task to take it down. People to this day argue that this would have been the Tyrannosaur Slayer. While T-Rex had a powerful bite, Therizinosaurus had the advantage of reach, meaning it could have cut down even the most fearsome predators before they could react. If these creatures chose violence, the entire world as we know it could be entirely different. But what What other creatures could have made this list? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, check out the others on my channel. And like always, thanks for watching.